are with the West Virginia LTAP, and so excited that you guys have come into the session. I think conflict management is one of those topics that we all can use some assistance with, especially during this unprecedented time that we're dealing with. It's my pleasure to be able to introduce Emily Wilder from the Kansas LTAP. And so one of the great things about the LTAP program is we have a lot of talent across the US. And so we're excited when they share their knowledge and resources with us. Emily is the Associate Director for Business Operations at the University of Kansas Transportation Center. In addition to managing day-to-day operations for the center, she's also the Kansas LTAP Director. She's also involved. She's the liaison for the American Public Works Association in NLTAPA, and she is co-chair for the NLTAPA's Partnership Work Group. Emily holds a Master of Science in Management and Leadership and a teaching certificate from the Kansas Leadership Center. She is working towards becoming a leadership coach and completing Harvard's Public Leadership Credential. Emily uses her education experience to develop and teach soft skill courses. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Emily. It's all yours.
All right. Thanks, Kim. Well, good morning, everyone. Of course, you know I'd get a little tickle in my throat as soon as we start. It's snowing here in Kansas, so I don't know how the weather is where you're at, but it's a nice cold day. Good to be inside. Glad to be working from home. And today we're going to be talking about managing your response to conflict. This is one of my favorite presentations to give. There's going to be a lot of interaction. Please use that chat box quite regularly throughout. And I'm really excited for this. So to get started, we're going to start off with a short poll. We just want to get some data in the room. And Alexis is going to put that up for us. And the question is, have you had conflict management training before, specifically managing your response to conflict? So I'll give you guys a minute or two to get that answered. All right, we're about 60-40 right now. It's like the election, we have a lot of early voters, some laggers. All right, yeah, so it looks like we ended up right around 60-40, so perfect. If you've had training before, this is great. As you know, practice makes perfect. More training you have, the better. And if you haven't, you're going to get training today. And one of the reasons why I love this presentation, I love teaching on conflict management and specifically managing your response, is because we all experience conflict, right? Regularly. We have jobs, we have relationships. Because we still have jobs, we must be doing an okay job of managing conflict in our response to it, but we can always do better, right? And since it impacts every area of our life in one way or another, the better we can manage our response, we're going to be more successful in our relationships, in our career. All right, so let's get down to it. And what we're going to be covering during today's training, we've got about 50 minutes. I'm going to try to leave time for questions as well. We're going to be walking through and understanding what activates you, what activates your stress response. What does that look like? We're going to be looking at how can we manage that. We're going to be practicing the components of the STOP method, which is a method I created to help us manage that response. As we learn the STOP method, we're going to be applying it to a case scenario, a role play scenario. And then you're going to be leaving with tools to apply the STOP method to your own personal conflicts. So we have a great handout for you. Alexis is going to put that in the chat box. Perfect. Perfect timing, Alexis. Feel free to download it if you want. We're going to be using some of the resources throughout the presentation. It would be helpful. It's not required, but it's a good resource for you both during this presentation and for you to look at afterwards. All right. So let's
Emily,
get
I wanted
started
to note that that will be available in the files drop-down menu as well.
Great, thank you. All right, so let's get started with activators. And when we're talking about activators, we're talking about actions, behaviors, events, ideas, words, people that simply set you off. And activators can be negative or positive. So a positive activator for me is seeing puppies. I absolutely love puppies. If I'm driving down the road and I see someone walking a cute dog, my first instinct is to pull off and try to pet this dog. Now, I don't do that. That would be strange and a little unsafe. But activators are something that cause you to react more out of emotion than out of strategy, right? They're not conscious, they're not productive. And when we're dealing with negative activators, which is usually what we're experiencing during conflict, they're not helpful, right? Not conscious, not productive. We're usually dealing with negative, and they can usually be traced back to a value. So something that's very important to us that we're not getting in that situation is causing this activated stress response. So let's look a little bit more at what activates you. So go ahead and answer in the chat box, take a moment to reflect. What are some words or phrases, people, situations, actions that activate you? And while you're throwing that in the chat box, I'll tell you a story that happened just last week. I had placed an order on mobile ordering to pick up food from a restaurant. And when we get there, they didn't have what I ordered. They were sold out. And so they said, well, what would you like to sub instead? And so I make my selection. It's not nearly the same price difference. And they don't refund me for the original purchase. They just sub it out, which that doesn't feel very fair to me. So I was a bit activated from that. And my wife, we were picking it up through the drive-thru, and she's in the driver's seat, and she drives away. And so I went from being activated at the fast food restaurant for not refunding my order, we're paying more, to then my wife driving away so I can't fix the situation. And then she gets activated because I'm frustrated with her. And so we can see how it kind of snowballs pretty quickly. All right, and I'm seeing lots of answers in the chat. Awesome. Name calling, people who make assumptions. Yeah, without actually looking at the situation, we're going to be talking about that later, the difference between observations, the details, and then perception. Those assumptions are interpretation. People's tone of voice, yeah. Being dismissed, oh, it's the way we've always done it. Yeah, yeah. It's not broke, don't fix it. And you're like, well, I think it is broke, but people who don't try, not my job, inconsiderate behavior, people who are lazy, who lie, yeah, complainers, awesome. Yeah, and this is usually what we're experiencing in a work environment, right? People who don't want to change, compliance issues, misrepresentation of facts, yelling, exactly. So now that we know those are some of the things that activate you, what do you notice in yourself when activated? What does your response normally look like? Shut down, fight or flight, get irritable, can't breathe, yeah, stop talking, elevated heart rate, you get sarcastic, yep, hidden anger, frustrated, defensive, yeah, we usually get defensive, accusatory, shut down, or we do too much, right? We push, we get aggressive. Yeah, it becomes a conflict. Hard to process emotions quickly and come up with a work appropriate response. Yeah, I'm glad you said that. We're going to be talking a little bit about how we can process those emotions more quickly. All right. So what do others see when you're activated? That's what it looks like to you. How might other people interpret your response? Defensive. Yeah. Sometimes when we withdraw, people think, oh, they don't care about the problem, right? They become dismissive. They see you being quiet, withdrawn, uninterested, not engaged, or too engaged. People stay away from you, combative. Yeah, so we usually see these two ends of the spectrum, right? We usually withdraw a lot, seem disengaged, we look away, lose eye contact, seem unconfident. We have the other side that gets really passionate about it, frustrated. People think, oh, they're angry. Maybe I should stay away from them. Maybe it's not a safe place for them anymore. Just aloof in general, yeah, somewhere in between. All right. So if that's your response and that's how other people see it, when you don't manage that response, what's the result? What's the result on the problem? What's the result on the relationship with the people you're working with? What's happening there when we don't manage that response effectively? We always say things we don't mean. Miscommunication of emotions. Yeah, it's a poor result. Problem doesn't get solved, relationship starts to break down, no resolution, it festers, it can build into something worse, like ferments. Things don't get done well, progress slows, we internalize it, and then it continues to affect us, right? We're upset, can't focus on what we need to do. Productivity suffers. Yeah, that's usually what we see, right? When we don't manage our responses well, the result is disconnect. It's disconnect from the problem, it's disconnect from the people we're working with, and often it's even disconnect from ourselves, from our own emotions, from our own needs, right? We're not getting those met, and overall everything suffers. So it's critical that we need to be able to manage our response in order to manage conflict overall, right? So how do we do that? And we're going to be using the STOP method. And the STOP method is a lot like a stop sign. So when you think about where we place stop signs, we place them at intersections that have the potential to be dangerous because they force us to take the time to stop, to assess what's happening, look both ways, and then we can proceed thoughtfully. And so the STOP method follows those same principles. It's in the name, reminds us to stop. And then we look at our sensations, what's going on within us, take the time, what's going on around us, assess how we're feeling, what's happening, and it prepares us to be able to respond thoughtfully and with intention, right? The main thing is we want to move from reaction to intention in our actions. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through the components of the STOP method and apply it to a case scenario as we do. So we're going to start off by reading the case scenario, and this can also be found in that handout, so you can use it to reference later as well. All right, scenario 1 for our road crew members out there. It's a 90-degree, I know it's cold now, but we'll imagine it's summertime, humid summer day, and the roadway maintenance crew is on Carter Road, getting ready to start another chip seal project. They completed 2 other roads this morning, and the summer day is just getting hotter and more humid. It's lunchtime, so the crew's taking a break in the shade. They're eating their lunches, they're getting rehydrated. They're just finishing up when Carl, a neighborhood resident, comes flying out of his house, and he yells at them and he says, why are you putting this crap on our road? Do you all ever do anything right? My taxes and my neighbor's taxes pay your salary. We don't want this chip seal crap. We want the road paved. We're entitled to have our road paved. And it must be nice to have a job where you can hang out in the shade whenever you want. How many people have had a similar scenario to this? So a few of the crew actually agree with Carl. They don't like this chip seal stuff. And one of them has a brother who works at the local asphalt plant. Others disagree, and they want to debate the issue head on with the resident and even with each other. It's their last job of the day. They're hot, they're tired, they're lacking patience, and they just want to finish the job and be finished for the day. All right, so let's keep this case study in mind as we go through the STOP method. All right. And like I said, you can always reference it in the handout as well. So now that we're into the STOP method, we're in the first part, S, and that's for sensing. So we're going to be walking through our physical sensations and our emotional. So I want you to think about how it feels physically in your body when you're activated. So if you're one of those road crew members getting yelled at by Carl, what kinds of physical sensations are you experiencing? And I already see in the chat, increased heart rate. Yeah, what else? Those physical sensations. Tense, tight chest. Give me some more. Temperature gets warmer. We got hot, headache. My temperature gets colder, right? That's a response. Temperature changes, hot or cold. Gritting teeth, yeah, the clench of jaw. Adrenaline response. What does that adrenaline response look like physically? Sweaty palms. Yeah, our face can flush. We get beet red. Yeah, nauseous. Yeah, blood pressure goes up, right? Increased heart rate, maybe rapid breathing. Yeah, very tense. There's all this energy all of a sudden. We need to move around. Sometimes we can get tunnel vision, right? So we're so focused on what's happening that we ignore everything else around us. Some people cry when they get really upset. Some people laugh. Our posture can change. Yeah, either maybe it becomes more submissive or more aggressive. Exactly. And these are all perfectly normal physiological responses to stress, but they really aren't helpful to us unless we're planning to use fight or flight to handle the activator, the stress response. As much as we, might want to run away from the situation or on occasion to hit someone, we understand that that's not the best way to solve the problem. So we need to be able to mitigate or quiet these physical sensations. We need to become calm, cool, collected in these high heat situations. So kind of like an oasis in the desert. And a great way to do this is actually by using exercises in mindfulness. So we're going to walk through 2 techniques together. And these are 2 of my favorite techniques because they can be done anywhere, even when someone's yelling at you, angry Carl, and no one can tell that you're doing it. So the first technique is abdominal breathing, which simply means breathing from your abdomen. So a lot of the time we tend to breathe from our chest, which causes shorter breath. And when we get stressed, those breaths tend to become more rapid and we begin to lose oxygen. And we don't typically make the best decisions when we're losing oxygen, right? So what abdominal breathing does is it shifts our breath from our chest to our diaphragm. And by breathing deeply and slowly, we can actually lower our heart rate to help us calm down during stressful situations. So if you'll humor me for a second, we're going to practice. So I want you to place your hand over your diaphragm. It's right under your rib cage in the center of your abdomen. Now we're going to take a breath in and try to make your hand rise. Now breathe out slower than you breathe in. Let's do it one more time. So breathe in and out. How do you feel from those short 2 breaths? I see centered in the chat. Calmer. Focused. Yeah. Relaxed, lighter. All right. I love being able to incorporate these while I'm presenting because I'm like, oh yeah, I feel calmer too. All right. So we have one more technique that I want to share with you. And this one's tied to the awareness of the senses. So you can do this technique with smell, touch, sight, or taste, but we're going to practice it with hearing today. And what this technique does is it helps to remove the tunnel vision that we can sometimes experience when we're activated. So all I want you to do is listen and try to hear all the noises around you at the same level. So you're going to give the sound of my voice, the computer or HVAC, noises outside, my snoring dog if you can hear them, the same amount of space in your head. So just try to hear everything the same volume level. I'm going to give you about 10 to 15 seconds just to listen. You can close your eyes if you'd like. All right, how do we feel now? Let me know in the chat. At ease, calm, aware, focused, attuned. Yeah. Now I need a nap. Yeah. Someone always gets very tired. All right. So those are just 2 simple techniques that you can do at any time. If you're being yelled at by Carl, maybe don't close your eyes while you're listening, but you can still expand your hearing to everything around you. You can do it with your feet on the ground, feeling the clothes against your skin. Any of those will help with that tunnel vision and help calm you down at the same time. And mindfulness in general will actually help you be better able to respond to stress. Research shows that practicing mindfulness exercises regularly, especially when you're not stressed, when you're calm, can improve your emotional regulation. So for example, a 2010 study found that regular mindfulness training improved working memory capacity in soldiers. And working memory capacity is used in managing cognitive demands and regulating emotions. So, I saw earlier in the chat, it's difficult to manage those emotions quickly, right, and respond. So mindfulness helps us do this. It helps us train that ability. It actually increases our capacity to regulate emotions. So if you would like to practice more, there's a great app that was developed by the VA and the National PTSD Center called Mindfulness Coach. You can find it on the App Store on your phone. And that will give you more information about what mindfulness is and how it can be used and practiced. All right, so we've quieted down the physical sensations now. And once we get those taken care of, then we can try to figure out which value we hold that contributed to the activated response. Because if we remember, most of the things that activate us can be traced back to a value. And feelings can be great clues in helping us understand our values. So we're going to take a brief look a little deeper at feelings. And most of us, have heard the quote from Eleanor Roosevelt, "No one can make you feel inferior without your consent." And the truth is that really no one can make us feel anything. True feelings take responsibility for how we feel, and they're tied to an underlying value that we hold. So when we're expressing true feelings, we're holding ourselves accountable. But we often tend to use faux feelings. And faux feelings imply that someone is doing something to you, and they often connote wrongness or blame. So with faux feelings, we pass the blame onto the other party without taking responsibility for our feelings and values and needs. All right. And that leads us into values, right? So we're using feelings as a clue towards values. Values is really what we're trying to get to. And values are universal to all humans, and they typically fall into one of these 7 categories. So connection, physical well-being, play, peace, autonomy, meaning, honesty. And we can use many other words for what's important to us, but they're likely to be a synonym for one of these 7. And actually, one of the sheets in your handout is an entire feelings and needs sheet that has a big list of values and needs on the right-hand side. So that will be helpful for you to use as you continue to practice this method. And the reason why we want to acknowledge our values is because it helps us to take ownership of our feelings and our reactions. Right, so let's look at the example below. We have our faux feeling. You know, I feel like you betrayed me. Where does the blame fall on that? Falls on the other person. We're holding the other person accountable. I feel like you betrayed me. That's why I did this, right? We're not responsible for our actions. When we strip away the interpretation, we're left with just the emotion. I feel hurt. And then when we add the value, it might look something like, I feel hurt because trust is important to me. So how do those 2 sentences feel? That first one, the faux feeling, I feel like you betrayed me. And that last one, I feel hurt because trust is important to me. How are they different? How are they similar? Yeah, blame. One is blaming the other person. One's holding themselves accountable. If you were to hear the first sentence, if someone was saying that to you, how would you feel? Yeah, first can escalate conflict. You're going to feel defensive. You're going to maybe accuse them. Yeah, accused. If you heard that last sentence, if someone said to you, hey, you know, when you did this, I felt hurt because trust is important to me. How does that change your response? Yeah. Clearly communicates what they're experiencing, respects your autonomy. You would want to discuss it, right? So now instead of being defensive, you want to learn more. You want to connect. You want to say, you know, I understand that now. Let me get more information. What can we do to fix this? So it offers a collaborative environment, right? So that's why it's important when we are engaging with other people to use language similar to that bottom sentence, right? We want to make it easy for them to connect to us and to collaborate to fix a problem, rather than easy for them to be defensive and accusatory, all right? It's going to make our jobs easier. So let's look at a few more common examples. So we have a few examples of faux feelings that we often use and that we might use in the workplace. You know, blamed, dumped on, unsupported, taken for granted. And these faux feelings have all of our emotions and interpretations wrapped into one. And so when we strip out those interpretations that we often make, we're left with just our emotions in the middle, those feelings. So instead of blamed, we might be feeling angry, confused, or hurt. And once we know our emotions, we can use those as clues to dig down to our feelings or to our values and needs. What do we really need? Am I angry because accountability is important to me? Or am I hurt because I value fairness and I'm not interpreting this situation as fair? So knowing what we need is so important for effective conflict resolution, right? How can we collaborate with someone to meet our needs if we ourselves don't know what our needs are, right? How can we communicate that if we don't know? So let's go back to the case study for a moment. And I want you to imagine, if you're part of the road crew, what might you be needing in that moment? And you can look at your handout. It has the case study. You know, you're working in the heat, hot summer day. You've already done 2 jobs. You just finished lunch. Now this guy's coming out. He's yelling at you. There might be some infighting in your group. What might you be needing in that moment? And go ahead and put it in the chat. Yeah, and you can have different answers, right? We're probably all going to be needing some different things. So I see respect. That feelings and needs sheet can help you out. There's a list of needs. You can use some of the ones that are on the screen, come up with your own. Respect, appreciation, recognition, understanding. Yeah. Any others? Yeah, you might just needing to pause the situation, need time to respond. You need fairness, yeah. All right, we're gonna do a quick shift now. What do you think Carl, the angry resident, might be needing? Yeah, he might needs to feel heard. Maybe he needs better understanding, needs an explanation. Validation. Yeah, recognition of his thoughts and opinions. Yeah, he might need to understand the situation. He might like you to understand where he's coming from. Awesome. Great. So with that, we are done with S, done with sensing and the stop method. So we've gone through our physical sensations. We've worked to quiet those down a little bit. And then we looked at our emotions. What are we feeling? You know, stripping away those interpretations. What are just the emotions that we're left with? And what does that tell us about what we're needing from this situation? What our values are here? What's being activated at our core? And we looked at that from the perspective both of if you're the road worker in the scenario and if you're Carl. Because as we're using this stop method, if we can at the same time connect to the other person's values and needs, just make a guess about it, we're viewing them as another person with values and needs. And that helps build a collaborative approach, right? So now we're on T, which is take the time. And often when we are activated, we react instinctively. But it's important that we take the time to respond appropriately and with intention. So whether it's a few seconds to breathe, or maybe you have a few hours, a few days, a few weeks to respond to an email or an issue, we need to take the time. Time is what allows us the chance to process information and make a calculated rather than reactionary decision. All right, and this slide really illustrates what taking the time is all about. So for every situation, people are bringing in their own life history, experiences, personality, temperament, you know, what they just did that day, that morning. In the case study, they've already worked 2 jobs, right? They're exhausted. And then a stimulus happens that causes us to become activated, and we have a few choices. So we can either react, which we normally do. That's kind of our default. And we tend to react poorly by blaming, judging, criticizing. We can choose to pause, to breathe, to relax our muscles, to slow down, to connect with this process, with ourselves, with what we're needing. And by doing that, by taking that moment to pause, we can then respond. And specifically respond with the intention to connect, right? We're listening for feelings and needs from the other person. We are working to collaborate with them. We're focused on the problem, right? We're solution focused. And so the mindfulness exercises are a great way to take the time. You have a worksheet in your handout that you can use if you maybe have longer time. You can do the worksheets. That's a great way to take the time. If you're in a situation where you need to buy time, ask them questions or say, you know, hey, I need some time to think about this. Can we, you know, come back in 30 minutes or let me give you a call back. I don't have the time right now. Right, so you can buy yourself time and take time. All right. With that being said, take the time is the shortest part of that stop method. in the presentation at least. All right, and the last two we're going to talk about together, which are O and P, observations and perceptions. So when we're talking about observations, they're just the facts. It's the details, it's what a video camera could record, it's what you see, hear, or touch, and they're statements without focus on right or wrong. So no interpretations, we're not trying to make sense of what you observe, it's just what you see. Perceptions, on the other hand, is our interpretation. We're making sense. It's our different backgrounds, it's viewpoints, it's based on culture and temperament and personality. It's our individual lens or filter for how we see the world. So, for example, in the picture on the right there, there's glass, there's liquid in it. Those are observations. There's two people. And then we see the perception, the interpretation. One person says, oh, it's half full, the other half empty. We see that there's a shape on the ground in the left picture. Observation. Again, there's two people. They're pointing. Those are all observations we can make. It's what we see. They're seeing the same thing, the shape on the ground, and they're interpreting it differently. One sees a 6, one sees a 9. So it's important that we know the difference between what are the facts, what are the observations, and then how is it being interpreted. So let's use our case study. And what are some observations we can make from the case study? What's some of the details that we have in there? Just the facts. Carl's angry. That could be an interpretation. What tells us that Carl is angry? Yeah, we can read that the crew's tired. It's 90 degrees. Yeah. Temperature is hot. Even that could be an interpretation, right? Hot is relative. 90 degrees. Carl came out of his home. Yeah, so these are a lot of perceptions, which is fine. That's the next question. What's your perception? And so, yeah, if you're working on that road crew and you see Carl come out, he seems upset. He seems angry, displeased. Yeah, maybe we can make a big interpretation that public communication about project techniques and benefits is lacking. Yeah, the road crew is sitting and eating, having lunch. They intend to apply the chip seal. Yep. So what does this situation look like from Carl's perspective? What's he seeing? How is he interpreting the data? Yeah, lazy, incompetent work crew, government's wasteful, ineffective choices being made, tax dollars being spent unwisely, people sitting around, his money being wasted. Yeah. He thinks the chip seal is going to make ugly streets. Lots of unhappy stuff. All right. Hey, prefers new paving. What might a third party perceive the situation? So you have the road crew, you have Carl, yelling, saying his points. Someone's just driving by. What might this look like to them? Someone irritated with more road work. Yeah. Yeah, maybe they agree with Carl. Maybe they're like, hey, leave those poor workers alone. Like, can't you see they've been out in the heat all day? Inconvenience to everyone. Yeah, so we can make a ton of different interpretations about this situation, this scenario. All right, so that's observation and perception. And that kind of wraps up the STOP method for us. So we've gone through sensing, taking the time, observations, perceptions, and we've applied it to this case study, this scenario as we've gone. So now that we've finished the stop method, what's next, right? We're not meant to stay at a stop sign forever. So we have a decision to make. And there's two choices on the screen, but really there's three options available to us. So we can go left, so to speak, and make a request. We can go right and make an offer, or we can just go straight ahead, go on with our day, not address the situation. So if we're making a request or an offer, we want to be smart about it, right? We want to make a specific request or offer. It needs to be measurable. We need to know, right, whether or not it's been done. It needs to be achievable, relevant, and time bound. So a lot of times when we're talking about conflictual situations, we make requests that aren't actually a request for an action. So I'll give just a personal example we might hear in relationships. I need you to pay more attention to me. Well, what does that mean? What does that look like, right? Does that mean more eye contact? Does that mean more dates? What does that mean, right? So we want to be very, very clear in our request that we're making or offers that we're making, very specific actions. We need to know how it's being measured, okay? For both a request and an offer, you need to be open to hearing no. If you're not open to hearing no and you're making a request, it's actually a demand. You're making a demand then. We don't want to make demands because that's not partnership. If you're making an offer, you also want to be open to hearing yes. So don't bluff, don't offer something that you can't deliver on, right? And then the language we usually use is, as we're making a request, would you be willing to? Making an offer, would you like? So I want you to think about this case scenario. If you're one of the road workers, what's your need? Who is most likely to help you meet that need? And which way do you want to go? Do you want to let the situation pass? Do you want to make an offer to Carl, maybe to some of your road crew members? Do you want to make a request of anyone? Who's that request going to? Is it going to Carl? Is it going to your teammates? Is it going to a supervisor back at the office? Is it going to your elected officials? So be thinking about what is my need and how can we meet that, right? So that's what I'll leave you with today. You have the worksheet, you can work through it. There's another case scenario included in the PowerPoint presentation and in the handout that you can work through as well. Just some extra practice for you. We have 5 minutes, and so I want to go ahead and wrap up, leave time for questions. But if you have any questions later after this presentation, please feel free to email me and I'll share that information with Alexis so she can put it up as well. Thank you. Yeah, so the worksheet was sent in the chat at the beginning of the presentation, and Alexis, I think you also put it in the file drop.
Yep, that's correct. So it's also available in the files drop down in Talent LMS.
Great.
And you'll notice that it'll say
Yeah, with that.
2B. And it'll say 2B, and then at the end it'll say handout. So you know the difference between the handout and the PowerPoint that is available to you.
Yeah, I also see Ida put a great response in the chat. She would make an offer, invite Carl to public meetings about the road project so he can learn more about what's going on and give input to people who will be making decisions. So she makes an offer to him, trying to meet his need, right, in a way that's actually going to be beneficial. All right, any questions for me? And you can feel free to unmute as well if you don't want to type something out that's long.
Oh, it was great. Thanks.
Thank you. Yeah, Beth, what if you've handled conflict badly and you need to reach back out to try to make amends? So I'm sure we've all done that at some point. And when you do reach back out to make amends, you really need to connect and empathize with their point of view first. So it's really about intentionally connecting to the other person and receiving their emotions and their needs and working to meet those first to build that relationship repair back up. All right, thank you guys very, very much. Great start to a Monday morning.
Emily, it looks like you have one question about how do you recommend dealing with people who are acting in bad faith?
Yeah, I just saw that. Drew, can you explain a little bit more about what you mean by bad faith?
Sure, I'll just go ahead and speak to that if that's all right.
Mhm.
Okay. I mean, I feel like your presentation somewhat assumes that in conflict there is often just sort of a misunderstanding, or people are communicating past each other and not with each other. And generally that people would be reasonable if they could just kind of see things from each other's perspective.
Yeah.
And I would agree that most people are like that. But sometimes you encounter people that are apparently, I mean, maybe they just have a significant amount of previous trauma, and they just need to hash out some things and blame you or things like this. And there's like no apparent means to come to some kind of amicable resolution, or in fact, they may even try to be, truly sabotaging the situation. I mean, I don't know. There's only so much de-escalation you can do, I feel like.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Thoughts?
Yeah. No, I mean, you bring up a good point, right? I have family members, so trust me, I understand that sometimes it feels like you're not talking to reasonable people. And the great thing about this, though, is if you understand what your need is, you don't need that other person to meet that need for you. There are so many different strategies that you can use to meet that need specifically. So if you're dealing with someone who is just not in a place to communicate or actively trying to disconnect or make things worse, you are well within your rights to say, this isn't worth it. There's a concept that we talk about, best alternative to a negotiated agreement. It's your BATNA. Basically, it's, what if this person you're trying to connect with just says, F off? And that's something you need to look at. So that is a whole nother presentation I could get into, but there's definitely lots of opportunities where you can, if you don't think that working with this other person is going to lead to your needs being met or their needs being met, you can come at it from a new strategy, try a new approach.
Emily, thank you so much. We are actually at our time, and that was a wonderful response to that. Thank you for your time and your presentation. You did a wonderful job. Everybody else, it is time for our next session, which begins right at 11 o'clock. You have about 9 minutes, so please be sure to click the red leave button, refresh your screen, and then you can go and choose between 3A or 3B. We'll see you at 11.
Thanks, Emily.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
We'll touch base later.
Okay.